Hello and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Doof Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most ritualistic work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are back to talk about Stolen Away. Stolen Away, chapters 2.2, 2.3, and notes on spells. What was it?
Yeah, I think
Spell
it was called
notes
Notes on
number 2.
Spells. Although really, I think the majority of our talk is going to be Forest Ribbon Trail.
Yes, not. I mean, that's also a spell, right? Of sorts, a ritual-ish thing, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
What even is a spell? It's an arbitrary definition.
Let's have that argument, I think.
Yeah, let's get there later. First, let's start off with Stolen Away 2.2, which begins with the Kenneteers calling on Miss to give them another warning about not going to talk to the faerie, just so they have more warnings about this to discard and ignore.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a great bit where when Miss first appears, she's under the bridge that they're on, and so like Verona starts leaning over the bridge, to sort of try and get a glimpse of Miss, and Lucy has to like yank her back before she falls off. Which, first of all, I love all the interesting ways the universe seems to conspire to make sure you can't see Miss, but also just Lucy having to yank Verona from the edge of a bridge it's barely even a metaphor. I mean, it's just straight up like...
yeah, I can't believe I didn't... And not even that, but she's being tempted over the edge of a bridge by Miss.
Yeah.
Like, it's very on the nose when you stop and think about it.
And of course, like, Avery's sort of sitting off to the side nervously, which, she's wont to do.
Is it Avery who's clutching like a bottle of soft drink at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah, classic Avery.
Probably the most sensible of a lot of them, honestly.
Yeah.
We also so we're in Verona's head for 2.2.
Yes.
And we just had all that stuff in 2.1 about like how she was, basically getting like stress illness, like, she was starting to feel physically sick. And she sort of starts to talk about that more, and basically, I mean, for her, she's thinking, oh my god, my emotions are so bad that it's making me sick. That makes me shit and pathetic like my dad. And it's just like,
Jesus fuck.
She can't even let herself feel bad because it makes her think of it. Like, that's just how deeply rooted this bad cycle is for her. Like, it's so rough.
It's really toxic, huh? Like,
yeah.
It's throughout this entire chapter, there are moments of her and she, like, makes comparisons to her dad in her head.
Yeah.
And it is just like this pervasive toxic thing that is, ruining her life or intruding on all these moments of her life. Maybe ruining is a bit strong, but definitely at least negatively impacting.
Well, like later on, she brings up the whole garden thing where she's like, oh, I'd love to do a garden as a project, but then my dad would want to help. And it's just like, you can just see how, like, maybe even all the stuff with the dancing, like her dad was like, oh, I'll take you to dancing and I'll come to all your recitals. And Verona was just like, fuck it, I'm never dancing again.
Yeah, it's totally that thing we were talking about last time we were in Verona's head where, oh no, it was in Lucy's head actually, I think it was in 2.1, where, Verona's hobbies are just completely, like she has no passion to pursue hobbies because anything that she wants to pursue would just be tainted by her dad.
Yeah, exactly. And it sucks.
Yeah,
I hope she finds a way past it that doesn't involve turning into something, other.
Yes, turning into some other beast, monster / miss. So yeah, and I wanted to dive into a bit more of the text of Mrs. warning to the trio about fairies, because I do think it's such a, like, obviously we'll meet the fairies shortly, but the way it's set up, they just seem so crazy. Like, they're this thing that is all about weaving these elaborate webs of interconnected trickery. And it just kind of made me realize again how perfect this setting is for like a murder mystery story, because these faerie are basically these examples of like the iconic like Machiavellian supervillain in a mystery villain who plans out every step of this mystery along the way and has these complex plans which fall into place piece by piece.
Yeah, they're like a Moriarty, except like believable, because they've actually had thousands of years to practice this shit.
Yeah, and it is just it kind of made me realize that more and more as we see more of these others, they all are basically their own version of like tropes of villains from mystery or horror. I mean horror obviously, but mystery as well. Like it lends
Yeah.
itself so well to this setting, this kind of story because the others are just literal embodiments of the tropes from mystery movies.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Um, in fact, actually, while we're talking about that, I just wanted to shoehorn in another thing. Like, we obviously had Scott and Matt on for that reflections episode that we did
Mm,
earlier in the
mm,
week, and there's something Scott talked to us about before we went on air that he then like forgot to actually say on air, and I just wanted to give him the credit for it now because I thought it was so much fun. He was basically trying to work on this theory that each of the three Kenneteers sites are inspired
mm,
by like classical evidence gathering parts of mysteries. So like Avery sees the connections and they sort of take the form of the film rolls. So there's a bit of a
mm.
security footage aspect to their manifestation as well as, just the fact that she sees the connections between people. That's obviously great for figuring out clues. And then Lucy, reads people's emotions, which is great to figure out the clues, but she kind of sees this as like, you know, dagger wounds. Like, it's the wound in the body that they find in a way. And then I think
Yeah.
Verona's was the one he hadn't thought about, and I tried to think on it, and it's a little hard. I haven't quite cracked it, but Verona sort of sees this plastic sheeting, and she has a little friendos behind it, which I don't know, maybe that's something to do with informants. Yeah, maybe Scott's come up with something cleverer by now. I don't know, but yeah, I just loved that whole idea of how each of their sites was kind of, dipping into mystery, clue finding tropes.
Mm. The plastic sheet reminds me of like a covered up body. So maybe that's something. Like
Yeah,
she's the victim.
I was thinking of that too, but I don't know.
It doesn't super track, does it?
Yeah, I don't know where to take it. Like, yeah, it feels like it's within reach, but isn't quite clicking.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, they I think we should talk about the fact that these three have basically just been ignoring all the advice that they get from most of the characters in this story. Um I like and it seems like it's especially Miss, presumably because Miss maybe is the one they don't trust as much, and so they'll possibly listen to things that Edith and Matthew say, or they'll definitely listen when it's like a practical piece of like, here's a cool trick you can do, right? But when
Yeah,
it's, hey, here's a way you should act or not act around, for example, the Hungry Choir or these fairy or whatever, they just kind of ignore it.
yeah,
And that's bad.
there's super good evidence for why young teenagers need boundaries. Because, like,
Mm,
Miss sort of takes this tack of, listen, everyone's telling you shouldn't talk to them. I'm telling you shouldn't talk to them, but I'm not going to stop you.
yeah.
And then they're like, okay, cool. Well, we're going to go talk to the fairy. And she's like, okay. Like, fucking, I told you not to. Whatever.
Having said that, though, I mean, obviously there's some bumps along the way, but I think it mostly works out okay so far, at least.
Yeah, but the whole thing is that 2 years down the
Yeah,
line, like
true.
that's
Yeah,
that's Mrs. whole thing. And she's like, yeah, 2 years down the line, you're
it'll
going
be
to find out
fine
this was
now.
the
Yeah.
start of the elaborate ploy.
But we won't be paying attention to this story in 2 years, so what do we care? It'll be over by then. I mean, I don't know. God, we'll see. Anyway, so the other thing that I really like is Miss sets up the idea that we'll see later of, in order to break through the kind of trickery and complex webs that these fairies weave, um, you just kind of need to be blunt and to the point. And Lucy makes the connection with what Cherry Pop did, where she tied a condom to a tree to smack them in the face, which is just like, oh shit, like this was actually not just a ridiculous goblin thing, but actually the exact perfect way to deal with a fairy, which is more evidence that Cherry Pop is the best and sanest character in this story.
Yeah. There's like a hint here that they're setting up this sort of dichotomy between goblins and fairy. And what's so funny is, like, I think at the surface level, I would assume that the fairy are just completely on top of that dichotomy. Like, it would be very lopsided. But this thing Miss says seems to suggest it might actually be a bit more even, just because like the goblin are so blunt and crass and easily tricked, but like the fae's trickery kind of gets undone if you just throw poop at them. Like
Yeah.
it's such a funny idea. And I mean in general, like that would be my summary. Like this whole dichotomy of the faerie are like these ultimate, you know, tricksters who are super clever, and they're so much fun. I mean, we're gonna get to Marisica and Guilherme in a sec, but they're so much fun. But so are the goblins, despite being completely the opposite. Like, I love how Warbo's managed to sort of set up two complete opposites and have them be like equal amounts of fun for the opposite reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, they like we obviously have kind of fallen in love with the goblins already because of their bluntness, and we fall in love with the fairy because of their, trickery. And those are the exact opposites of each other, and yet they're both so delightful.
And also frustrating in their own way. Like,
Yes.
yeah, it's so great. Like, yeah, he's managed to make both ends work just as well. It's so much fun.
Yeah. There's so many bits in this. This is such a dense chapter, like so full of great things to pull out. Like we haven't even got to the bit with the fairies, which is, I don't know, the core of this chapter, and there's still so much. Anyway, I want to pull out this line where Miss is talking about Marisica and refers to her as this so-called spider.
So
And
isn't she talking about the Hungry Choir at that point?
is she? Wait, no, I thought she was talking about. She's talking about the complex web that is being weaved by the Fae.
I thought she was talking about the web
Now
of
you're making me feel like I've misremembered it. Oh, right, stolen away, so-called spider.
No, you're right. We can cut all this.
Hold on.
Yeah.
No, you're right. No, you're right. I think. Wait. Fuck. No. Okay. Oh my god. This is why it's confusing. Okay, because
they call both
Verona
spiders.
references. They call both of them spiders over the course of this chapter. No. So, Miss is talking about Marisica here and refers to her as a so-called spider, and it jumped out at me because we see in 2.3 that Marisica has this like spider face underneath all her illusion. Like that's what the base version of her kind of looks like. I suppose. And it's interesting. Like I don't think it's a trick by Miss, but it does feel like a just little. Like
hint?
just little winks and nudges that exist in this world that these three just never are going to pick up on.
Yeah, I mean, what's fun about this whole conversation with Miss is it feels like she's being really obtuse. I just remember reading this the first time thinking, God, Miss, just answer a question directly. Then we have the conversation with the Fae, and you come back and read Mrs. at the start, and you're like, oh, she's so nice and direct.
Yeah, comparatively, it's very straightforward, isn't it?
She's a little mistransparent relative to the Fae. I mean, the other thing that sort of jumped out to me is later in the chapter, Verona brings up that like they've actually joked about Miss having a spider's face.
Jesus.
So Mrs. Marisica confirmed.
Yeah, but it seems like everything is a spider to these people.
Yeah.
This is how they refer to everything.
No, I just think it's funny because they like the joke about Miss having a spider's face is it was like, oh, it's because secretly she's like evil, and that was sort of the point of that joke. And then now they're like, hey, like the Marisica face reveal sort of comes when Avery's like, yeah, you know what? I think I am just gonna hang out with the Fae a bunch more.
Yeah,
and it's like, no, you just found out she has the evil spider face.
Yeah,
do not do
the
this.
thing that you said would be evil as a joke is actually true. That should be a warning sign, right?
Exactly.
Yes, but we'll see if they take that warning.
They won't.
I doubt it.
They won't. They don't.
Yeah, they won't. So the other thing that Miss kind of drops in this conversation and never really elaborates on, but I found so fascinating, is she's got this genuine fear of potentially becoming a prop in the Hungry Choir's Hunger Games, let's call them, which is so wild. Like, is that a thing that could happen?
Yeah, this bit has been driving me nuts since I read it because it feels like Warbo is just like shaking the truth in front of our faces. And I can't for the life of me figure out what this is hinting at. Like, so the sort of context is she says, oh, I could very easily become a prop in the Hunger Games. Like they set out a table and I could very easily get drawn into becoming like the waifs or the flyers, like a tool for them. but I'm
Yeah.
not at risk of that with the faerie because they turn the world into their stage, and I can just slip out of that.
Mm.
And so that, like, then I'm just sitting here, I'm like, what?
What does that mean?
What? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it winds up a bit. We obviously get a lot of people predicting that Miss is one of these lost people who take this ribbon
Yes.
trail.
Yes.
And so that kind of lines up with the whole being able to escape the Fae world as a stage thing. I don't quite understand how it fits into the Hungry Choir part, though. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure either. It's hard to know, right? The only thought I really had from it was like, we find out later that the forest, or not the forest ribbon trail, that the paths is this like place that things go even when you're like lost. You're like double lost,
Yeah.
You're so lost that you're even more lost than the other lost places. And it kind of it reminded me of the idea of like being forsworn as a practitioner, but maybe for like an other, the equivalent of that is like you become lost. And so potentially if people realize that Mrs. Lost, that is like an avenue of power over her, and that's maybe how she would get involved with the Hungry Choir. Doesn't quite track, but I just, yeah, I also was thinking about it and couldn't figure out anything that felt very concrete, honestly.
Yeah, I can't wait to see. If she is lost, maybe it's like because the Hungry Choir opens like a little parallel dimension-y thing. Maybe she'd get sucked into helping set that up if she's someone who's kind of able to move between realms.
But based on what we see in these chapters, also the Fae can probably do that with the Fairy Court, which are also not, I mean, not a parallel dimension that they would create, but one that they would kind of access and open up access to. So yeah, you're right. It's impossible to understand.
This is just definitely going to be one of those lines where, like, 2 arcs from now, we're going to look back at it and be like, oh, obviously.
Yeah. What else from this conversation? Oh, here's something. Miss makes reference to 3 outside practitioners who have taken interest in what's happened to the Carmine Beast. And as soon as I read this, my tinfoil hat started going off like crazy because 3 practitioners who are now curious about what has happened to the Carmine Beast sounds suspiciously like the Kenneteers, right? In fact, the only thing that makes me think it's not the Kenneteers and Miss isn't playing a prank here is the word outside. But that could be referring to like outside of any in-group, right? Like outside of our council of others or whatever. It makes me think that my theory about the other practitioners being there being other practitioners that aren't these 3 is true because Miss is pretending that there are these outside practitioners, but the outside practitioners are actually the Kenneteers. The other inside practitioners are the ones that we haven't seen yet. That's my thought.
What if there's another town that has the same dynamic as Kennet and they've just done the same thing? So it's 3. Yeah. It's going to be 3 like 13-year-old boys from another town who got awoke like by the anti-Kenneteers.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the bit. Like, yeah, I agree that the fact that there's 3 of them kind of stood out to me as like, that's suspicious.
It's a weird coincidence, right?
Yeah, it's a common number, but like still it jumped out to me.
Yeah, it's literally a common number in this world, like a powerful number. True. But yeah.
But I love the detail Miss gives us on how she's sort of running interference with the other practitioners. Like she says, she's sort of setting up scenarios where they'll have to interview witnesses and stuff. And it just, again, like talking about diving into mystery tropes, she's like setting up like, crime scenes to keep them buried in paperwork, basically.
Yeah, she's setting up lots of false leads.
Yeah.
Just to guide them down the garden path. With the read that the practitioners she's referring to are the Kenneteers, this becomes more insidious as well. Miss basically explicitly saying, I'm fucking with you and setting up false leads to fuck you up, basically.
Yeah, although do they encounter the things she's talking about?
They don't encounter the specific things she's talking about, no, which seems to indicate that it's not as direct as what I initially might have thought, but you never know.
I mean, what's funny is this idea that if the practitioners do come and start to make a fuss, then the town will basically rely on the Kenneteers to sort of show up and act like they know what they're doing, which would just be a hell of a lot of fun.
Can we talk about the part as well where Miss said that if somebody does make a play to control the town, they'll have to band together and destroy them.
Yeah.
Like, not just kill them, but fucking destroy them? Jesus Christ, Miz.
Yeah, the Kenneteers don't seem to react appropriately to being told they'll like have to be part of a war.
Yeah, they're going to be conscripted to a fight, basically, is what Miz says, and they have no reaction to that.
They're sort of like, oh, that doesn't sound great. And it's like, well, yeah, it actually sounds very not great.
But I don't even think they're reacting to the destroying bit. They're just reacting to it in general and being like, oh, wow, you're right. We would have to do that. That would be terrible. Like, yeah. Yeah, cool. So the other thing that's great is Lucy in this, it seems to be on Verona's case a bit. Seems to be close to figuring out that something's up with Verona and is going to hopefully back her off of the ledge that she's dangerously walking close to.
I mean, we've sort of been getting these beats a lot the last few chapters about how all three, but particularly these two, are just so tuned into each other. Like we kind of saw in Lucy's head in 2.1, she was like, Verona's about to do something fucking dumb.
Yeah.
And, like we'll get to it later, but like, all these sorts of bits where they're watching out for each other and just later, I think it's more fun, all the interactions when Verona is a mink that we'll get to. Like it's such a, I just really enjoy the dynamic between these three. Like the way they genuinely care for each other and they're watching out for each other, but also taking the piss from each other. It's so much fun.
Yeah, it's a great dynamic, isn't it? So yes. So I guess we can finally move on from the conversation with Miss. And the next thing that happens, the Kenneteers head to visit John to basically refill their dog tags from him. And he's just chilling and playing guitar like a total babe.
I love how just blasé he is about the whole thing. They're like, oh, sorry if last night wasn't serious, but, like, we really appreciated your help. And I think his exact response is something along the lines of like, no, it was cool. Like, I had a good time.
Yeah. It was a fun hang, shooting some ghost children. You know how it is.
Yeah, and then he's like, yeah, some of them came and gave me the stink eye before, but what of it?
Yeah.
In fact, this scene is so peaceful and tranquil and nice. I'm gonna have my go at doing one of these bold predictions you've been doing, and I'm giving it. I'm gonna lock in. This is the last time we see John alive.
That's crazy that you would say that, Elliot. Why would you introduce that concept into the world? Why would you manifest that idea? Because if it happens now, it's your fault.
Fine, I'll accept that. But I'll be right, and that's what's important.
Yeah, you'll have earned predictor points. That's the most important currency for the podcast game.
I don't know. There's something just so good about this whole scene that I just started to get very worried for John.
Yeah. One of my favorite things in this scene is, I didn't notice it on my first read through, but I paid more attention to the specific games that Verona gives and how they talk about them. And it's totally, one of the games that they give John is just an alternate universe Pokemon game.
Oh yeah, it's
even Othermon. Lucy.
You got to bind them all.
Lucy even says, "Oh, you got to bind them all." That's good. Lucy says that she got the orange-red edition of the game to play, which is classic Pokemon spoofing. I wonder what alternate universe Pokemon looks like.
Yeah, especially like in a world like this, like if you're in the Pact verse, something like Yokai Watch is actually like really insensitive.
Well, here's the thing. They refer to it as the monster game. And then that as a word obviously has implications in this world. Not in the least because in this chapter and the next chapter, the word monsters, referring to the faerie and the rest of the others in general, comes up quite a lot. So maybe it is like to do with, monsters in the sense of all the spooky others that we've been seeing around.
Well, I mean, especially like, just to take that step further, like the idea of the three human practitioners going up to this other and being like, here, you can borrow this game we have where we run around and catch monsters and trade them. And it's just like, but don't worry that we're going to turn into evil practitioners who bind monsters. Like, that's not what we want to do. We just play video games that are like that.
Yeah, true. That's possibly the implication of what that would look like if you give that to John. Like, no. It's like they would have this legitimate fear about video games turning people violent, but not violent in the way we think of it, violent as in they just have a disregard for other creatures and collect and trade them, which is exactly what they don't want in Kennet.
Yeah, exactly. The others in Kennet don't care about Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto. They're much more worried about Pokemon affecting the kids.
Yeah. So next, the Kenneteers head to the fairy cave and start their peaceful and not at all bait conversations with God Gilherm and Marisica. We're going to pronounce
So
it as I think.
I think it's Guilherme and
Gilherme.
Marisica.
Gilherme and Marisica.
I'm much more confident about Marisica.
Yeah. Look, let's just say I'm glad I'm not doing the Pale Audio book chapters for this one. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, actually, I don't think we've ever plugged. We both did some readings for the Pale Audio book. Actually, Ruben did a much bigger one than me.
I did the Gabe's interlude. So if you want to hear me attempt to sing horrifying songs, check out that audiobook chapter.
Yes, and then I also did a bonus bit that was like 5 minutes long, but it was a bit of fun. But anyway, yeah, that I just want to call attention to the fact that there's a bit here as they're getting to the fairy cave where Verona turns her sight off and is like, wow, the sky is so blue and leaves are so green. And then about a minute later, she just switches it back on and it comes on like so quickly that she's like, wow, that was like, I think before I even finished having the thought that I wanted it on. So like just all this stuff about, like Operation Verother. It seems to be coming along very well.
Creeping up. Yeah, exactly. I wonder if there's, the world is especially bright and beautiful because they're at the fairy cave, or if it's just that she's kind of losing color from the world as she becomes less human.
That would be my guess. Like the whole, we kind of see how even the happier others like John and Alpy, they live these kind of routine lives.
Yeah.
So that you could see that there's sort of a metaphor for a bit of the vibrancy of the world being lost or something.
Yeah, true. Your like agency and uniqueness as a human kind of disconnected from.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, and so then I guess we're going to move into the fairy talk, which
yes.
I feel like there's an expectation that when people come and listen to a podcast like this, there'll be a sense of we've read the chapters twice and
we're going to tell you exactly what's going to happen. Yeah.
We have an idea of what's going on. So let's just set the record straight. We're about to dive into a fairy conversation. We have no fucking clue what's going on. Like,
yeah.
Even if we try to go galaxy brain with it, we're operating at a level far below the fairy and wild bow. I've learned.
Yeah, I think we've picked out some interesting bits and pieces, and there were some interesting Reddit comments and stuff like that were picking out potential traps and stuff. But this conversation is basically designed to be a puzzle and one that is going to continue to unravel over the course of the story. I don't think we're going to give you all the answers. Sorry to say, but let's just get that out now.
Yeah, not saying that we 100% hit that mark in the rest of the story either, but especially this part, we're not going to do it.
Well, no, every other prediction we've made, I think, is going to be 100% true. Just this part is too difficult.
Oh, yeah, especially all your very reasonable ones that you keep making. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think they're very reasonable, and I'm sure Wildbow will too. Anywho, let's continue. So the first thing I want to talk about here is Marisica's wings are so long that they drape behind her like a gown, and that's crazy to me. Like, even when we were told this, when someone's described as having wings, and even like bat wings, I'm picturing them like patterned moth or bat wings. They don't drape. Like, it's crazy how big these wings must be. Later on, I think it's in 2.3, we get a picture of Marisica and her wings are basically so big that they could fill the entire cave, which is insanity.
Yeah, I almost get the impression that, like, because there's a couple of lines where they talk about how, like, the way she flies when she dodges Guilherme's, like, attempts to stab her in the air. Like, when she does that, it doesn't look like she's moving in a real way. So, like, I wonder how real these wings are. Like, obviously she's got the spider face under her form, so maybe this whole form is like a kind of glamour, like it's all fake, in which case, like, the wings, maybe, they do, like, I think it said they, like, change size and stuff, so I think it was maybe all part of, like, her being good at glamour. Is that something she can do with it?
Yeah, just kind of present a completely false reality of what she looks like.
Yeah, like, if Verona can be a mink that has a human enough brain to talk, I don't see why Marisica can't have wings that don't make sense in space time, I suppose.
Yeah, I can buy that. Yeah, yeah, I can buy that.
I mean, her whole form is just so like we've just been talking about how like the Fae are these embodiments of like the other playing chess for thousands of years, so they're way better than you, and you really
Mm,
start to feel that like her wings have these patterns in them, and both Avery in the next chapter and Verona in this chapter keep looking at the patterns and being like, oh, there's just something interesting about them. And it feels like that sci-fi trope where like you see a pattern and turn into like a murderous psycho or something. Like
yeah,
there's part of me that thinks that these patterns are planting subliminal
some kind of
ideas.
Rorschach test
Yeah.
thing. Yeah,
But then, like, also part of me thinks that sounds like kind of bullshit. That's so Machiavellian. But also, like, maybe that's the point. Maybe they're just like, I'll show them the patterns, and then they're going to think the patterns are doing something, but they're not. But them thinking that the patterns are doing something is going to make them do blah, blah, blah. Like, and it's just the fairy, just like, this is why there's a whole thing. I'm just not going to play the fairy's fucking game because I can't. There's too many levels.
yeah. I feel like the whole thing is about these small, like edges and advantages that they get in encounters that they can then capitalize on. Right? Like we get an explicit example of this when Guillaume and Marisica are discussing an interaction they've had in the past where Marisica was kind of baited into making this one move that would set her up to have these lingering consequences, right?
Yeah, it's like he spent months attacking her in a specific way so that she would be like subliminally, fuck it, you know what I mean, trained to react in a certain way to one of his attacks so that he could use that to make her do a certain thing at a certain time. It's just like
Yes.
it's such a high level like play.
I feel like that's the level we're operating on here, right? Like so many bits and webs and drabs of like gaining small incremental advantages over other people and then hopefully capitalizing on them. So,
Yeah.
the fact that Marusika is almost always naked means that in order for Avery to look at her without being embarrassed, she's looking at these patterns. Potentially, these patterns are suggesting something that then is like, so we're like 3 steps down the chain already,
Yeah.
and already it's like, okay, it's this tiny little advantage that you get from this 3 or 4 step or more chain of sequences.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
We'll only have to see though, right? I do really love the dynamic that these two fairy have because it's obviously Guillaume is like playing the hero here, and Marisica is playing the villain kind of to them.
Yeah.
But then this also 100% feels like a trap where
Yeah.
Marisica is meant to be set up as the enemy in air quotes, and Guillaume is their ally. And that's the impression that Verona gets. This is a trap, and I 100% agree with it. That Guillaume is playing into this and playing off of their seemingly acceptance and trust of John in order to establish more trust than he has earned, and potentially bank that later.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. He's the one who tends to provide more helpful answers, and it's just like, yeah, this is just the state we're at where I'm like, that's suspicious. He's being almost helpful, but not quite
Yes.
too helpful. It's still believably unhelpful. Yeah, no. So I'm not playing this game because I will lose. Like,
Yeah.
um,
Okay. All right. Let's not go too deep on it.
I think there is like the fun thing though, like because they set up that rivalry about how it's like Guillaume's home and Marisica is just like this interloper who he can't get to leave.
Yeah.
And that's kind of all gone next chapter. Like,
Mm.
in terms of if we're talking about them working together, it kind of seems like once this dynamic has been established, they just kind of stop doing it, and the Kenneteers don't notice.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, maybe it's, I don't know. It's not enough to solidly put our finger on it as a trap, I don't think, but you're right. The other one I want to call out quickly is there's this one bit where Lucy asks specifically if they're enemies, which would answer this question. And Guillaume's response is, a question of courts and houses. I'm of the summer court. And obviously just not answering the question, right? And it's like
Yeah.
doing it in a way that baits Verona and us as the audience with some juicy lore that we want to dive down. So we conveniently forget that we had a question about, are these two enemies or not?
Yeah.
Which implies to me that they're not, that they're working together in this.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that because, like, I agree. There are probably like a dozen instances in this conversation where you can see the Kenneteers ask them a question and they manage to not actually answer it. And it's like, there's that part of me that wants to say, that doesn't mean they're conspiring. It's just, that's their nature. They're these indirect faerie, right? They're the opposite of the blunt goblins. So they just never answer questions directly. That's their nature. It doesn't mean they're scheming. But then also, for everything we've told about them makes me think that actually they are always scheming. So it's like those two things just aren't separate for them. Like
Yes.
so like I don't know. I don't know. The faerie make me so paranoid, and I love it.
Yeah, they're pretty fun, aren't they, to deal with? So what else? What else? There's bits where Marissa feels like she's manipulating the conversation the whole way through. She's playing off the gifts. There's one part where Lucy, like a few times, Lucy tries to be more blunt, and it kind of half works. But Marissa often will do a little trick to bring the conversation back around to where she wants it to be. All kinds of like manipulative bits and pieces.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting because when you read the conversation more closely with this idea in mind, you can see how the more blunt Lucy is, the more the topic of conversation does change. Like up until this point, because when Lucy brings up this question that you mentioned here, they're talking about the various fae courts, and Lucy just kind of bluntly says, "You don't like each other, whatever. We need to talk about more serious things." And then the conversation is pivoted by Marissa to a new topic. Whereas there's another time where Lucy's kind of like, "Can we please talk about something else?" and gets like nothing out of them. And it's like, because she was like a bit politer, it didn't seem to work as well.
Yeah.
So really there's almost something to say for trying to be like a goblin against these guys and just be like, "Look, shut the fuck up." Like I think there's one bit where Lucy manages to get Marissa to shut up, and it's when she just kind of directly tells her to shut up. So it's like that's when you get power over these fairies, when you're just like rude to them.
I mean, yeah, tracks with what Mrs. Warnings were, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. And then obviously, like, we get from Marissa and Guilherme here, like a bunch of details on the 7 courts of the faerie, which are just like super fascinating. There's like 2 categories of court. There's like the high ones and like the dark or the low ones, and then from there they go into seasons. And I just love this as a way to divide the fae up and kind of explore. Like I think Guilherme talks about the origin of the faerie, and they're all kind of different types of monsters, but there's this underlying theme of like, they seem to originate from something to do with lies and glamour.
Yeah.
And so you've sort of got this embodiment of lies thing, and also, their whole thing about how they kind of bored is the other thing they bring up. Like, they're trying to find ways to entertain themselves, and that's what the courts are.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see now, like, these courts are divided. Like, the higher courts, I think, seem to lean more in towards humanity. Like, it's all the fair and aristocratic ones that, lean into the human sides of themselves. And then you've got these dark ones, which are moving away from humanity and becoming monstrous. And then within that, you've got seasons. Like, summer is like stories and brightness and stuff, and the spring ones are like, the new change, and then the fall ones are like, the real twisting of change and stuff. It's such a fun way to categorize them. And then you get like winter, which is my favorite, as this kind of 7th one, and there's no high or fall one. It's like the fairy version of death, where they just become automatons.
Yeah, they basically are. They've become so stuck in their routines and dramas that they are just living out repetitive bits and pieces.
Yeah, they become stuck and unchanging.
As I was reading this, it felt like a trap. You know how it reminded me of the idea that they're trying to set themselves up, like they're trying to differentiate Guilherme as not just here to trick people and cause like confusion and play off of the drama. It sounded like they were both playing into this idea of Marissa is one type of thing that's like, oh, monstrous, evil, spooky fairy.
Kids naps, children.
Exactly. But Guilherme, oh, I'm a high summer, what was it? A summer above fairy. And so I don't descend to that level kind of vibe.
Yeah, well, he makes his like whole court, the summer above, out to. It kind of reminded me of like Greek hero type stuff. Like it's all
Yes.
like big swords, big drinks, big adventure. And it's like, yeah, okay, but like if you read Greek myths, that doesn't make them good people.
Yeah. I think it's another level of trap of like believe that Guillaume is good and on your team by like thinking that he's a summer above fairy. He's not going to be doing the kinds of shit that he's actually going to do to fuck you over.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just love this whole idea of having 7 courts to kind of divide up. I'm very interested to see what the differences are between the courts and kind of like, because I feel like the fairy as a concept are going to be exploring, this whole idea of lying and being bored and how you get around like the eternal boredom of immortality, and there's all these different techniques, and I'm kind of interested to see how they compare.
Yeah. I guess the thing that I'm the most worried about with these fairy now is we've learned that the court that Marisica is a part of is kind of known for kidnapping children.
Mm-hmm.
And Guillaume makes reference to the fact that these 3 are children. And the title of this arc is Stolen Away. And so putting all those pieces together, it's just kind of like, well, this is a bad scene. Whatever's going to happen here.
Yeah, you can't help but put those pieces together, can you?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we'll see. I mean, the other hint we start to get in 2.3 is that we're going on a trip down some paths.
Trip down the paths,
and
yep.
It seems like it'd be easy to get Stolen Away down on those as well.
Yep. Yeah. So I guess the next thing that happens in this conversation is we get to Marisica giving gifts. We get to the gifts. She's obsessed with these gifts, and she decides she's going to give 9 gifts to the Kenneteers. 3 gifts to each of them. 1 trick, 1 illusion, and 1. What was the third one?
So no, it's one instruction,
one instruction,
trick,
one
and
trick,
one
one
glamour.
illusion.
Yeah.
Glamour. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably illusion. Yeah. I mean, just before we get into those as well, like Marisica is obviously evil and the worst and stuff, but fuck, is she fun? Like,
yeah,
all this stuff where Lucy's like, okay, but what can we get back to the serious business? And then Marisica will be like, yes, the gifts, and she's so like performative, like she's always pacing around, and she's like, I will give you 3 gifts, 3, Verona, and like she's so theatrical and like. Talking about how the fairy are trying to stave off boredom. I mean, Mariska's doing a great job, I think, because she's fucking fun as, like, in the worst way. Like, I'm glad I'm on this side of the page when I'm reading it, because I wouldn't want to meet a fairy in person, but fuck, they're fun to read.
Yeah. God, the whole thing is so delightful, isn't it?
Yeah, like I love like the fairy drive you crazy, but I have so much fun at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. Should we get into these gifts?
Yeah, I actually sort of wrote them all down and I think this is, intentional on Wildbow and Marisica's part, but like I struggled to keep up with what all 9 gifts were.
Yeah.
So Verona gets some extra info on like how to use the rule of 3 to make contracts more yours. And then Lucy and also kind of Avery get told that the reason they were chosen was because they're all already becoming a bit other.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, yeah, like that was probably one of the more fascinating tidbits that we get.
Yeah, I mean, we had kind of been starting to put this together ourselves, right? The fact that they all have their own kind of vulnerabilities in this way, but explicitly that this was an explicit decision made to find 3 people who are likely to turn into others given the opportunity is not great. Not a great sign for the relationship between them and Miss and Edith and stuff.
Well, especially because it gives this sense of this is a path you're already on, and the Kennet others are basically making sure that happens to give themselves some protection.
Yep. If you have to indoctrinate new practitioners, indoctrinate ones that are going to turn into others and then not have any potential for power over you.
But it's that sort of thing where they may not have become others. It was just they were, maybe heading in that direction.
Yeah, but with that in mind, these gifts that Miss has been giving, or all these things that have been pushing them further down this path, become a lot more insidious, right? Like it's not just, oh, now that I've met you, I'm going to help you do the thing that you said you want to do. It's, we explicitly chose you because we could manipulate you into becoming others and therefore less of a threat to us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd love to start to trying to dig into theorizing what others we think they might turn into. Like, I'm actually pretty convinced. Like, the more we see of the Fae and the way they interact with Verona, the more very concerned I am that she would actually be a pretty good fairy given the time.
Interesting. Well, Verona's already going to become Miss, so that's ruled out.
Oh, good point. I forgot about that very confirmed theory.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, there's the whole angle here as well, where Avery kind of learns that there's no one for her, according to Marisica in town.
Yeah.
Which is sort of earth-shattering for Avery. But also, like, you're kind of like, well, yeah, but I mean, you can just leave town when you're 13 and you only have to come back here occasionally. Like,
yeah.
As an adult, you're kind of like, oh, you'll get over it. It's a few years. But you can see, like, how for Avery, that's, like, devastating. And, I mean, we'll get to her response to this next chapter.
I mean, this is the thing, right? This is a manipulation. This was my thought when I first read this chapter, and then seeing what happens in the next chapter, it's like, oh, this is what Marisica wanted, to set up this dynamic where Avery is now dependent on the glamour so that she can have some semblance of, I don't know, a relationship with the people that she wants to have relationships with.
Yeah, exactly. Then they each get, like, their tricks are like little seemingly one-use items that let them, you know, make copies of stuff or make a fake version of a thing, or, you know, kind of like a flashbang. Again, I can't help but notice Lucy gets the more violent-oriented gift. Like, hers is like the combat one, like the blinding, and she got the ring. Like, there's so much violence imagery in her. Like, it can't be a coincidence that she's the one who's so into finding what happened to the Carmine Beast, right? Like, there's some link between her and the essence of the Carmine Beast, I think.
Maybe Lucy did kill the Carmine Beast. Maybe that's what's happening. No. I agree. Again, like, they're being pushed down a path, and it seems like the path Lucy is being pushed down is becoming a John-esque other. I don't know exactly what.
Yeah, but, something that would have been in the Carmine Beast's order, right? Like, is the impression I'm getting. That was the direction she was maybe heading down. Yes,
for sure. So I guess this chapter ends with Verona being given her glamour, which is being turned into a weasel or a mink, I guess. And what an ending to the chapter. Like, it's so good. It again is reaffirming this beat of these three just not taking the threats in their life seriously enough. And this one's fine because the way this plays out, I actually feel like Marisica is not acting in bad faith. She's being quite a good faith actor here. And so again, it's fine in this situation, but I'm pretty sure it's going to soon not be fine.
Yeah, there's this sense of, like, I think Miss said the faerie would be the best ones to teach them, like, the potential loopholes and stuff like contracts. Like,
yes,
they would be the best ones to teach you like how to manage contracts and everything. And, you know, in an indirect way, that's what Marisica is doing by constantly fucking them over in long-term harmless ways. Like, you know, it's like, you know, the faerie can't just directly teach you things. They have to fucking toy with you, but you're kind of going to learn the lesson. That's about as good as it's going to get for a faerie lesson, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the fact that they aren't seemingly at risk of any long-term problems indicates that this is probably exactly what they need to start getting their head around this stuff a bit more.
Yeah, well, they do a lot better when we get to negotiating Avery's glamoring in a bit.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. So there's the supposed 9 gifts. They get 8 of them by the time we reach the end of our chapter 2.3. Lucy still has not received her glamour, so that's a bomb waiting to go off, I suppose.
What would be a potentially usable to do violence glamour that you reckon Marisica would give Lucy as a trap?
I don't fucking know.
It's hard to predict, isn't it?
I don't know if I want to try and predict the faerie. Yeah,
it's on another level. You just can't understand them. Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, chapter 2.3.
Yeah, so we'll jump into 2.3, which begins with Avery kind of seeing, we're in Avery's head, and she's watching Verona Weasel kind of coming to terms with its new form as Lucy tries to catch it and alternates between trying to catch it and like yelling at Marisica for help.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the Lucy stuff here because it's kind of this ongoing background thread throughout this whole first section.
Yeah.
So it's hard to find the best time. So I just want to do it at the start because it's obviously like you're kind of like, oh, you know, she's so upset and she cares so much and that's kind of heartbreaking. But also it's just kind of hilarious. Like Marisica just keeps shit stirring her.
Yep.
With like, you know, talking about like, you know, Verona being eaten if she goes outside and stuff. And you know, like there's so many things where Marisica will go on this long speech and then it just ends with like Lucy just yelling out the most offensive word in that thing of like, what do you mean edible?
Yeah.
And then like Guillermet says something and Marisica's just like, oh Guillermet, you know, you're just upsetting the poor girl. And it's like,
Yeah.
fuck off.
Oh god.
As if you haven't
so
been doing
good.
the same thing for the last 10 minutes. Like, so yeah, like it was just a hilariously tortured dynamic between Lucy and Marisica, and I feel like it culminates so well. To jump ahead a bit, like how eventually Lucy's like, "How do I break the glamour?" and Guillermet's like, "Oh, blunt force will do it." So she just pegs Verona at the ground.
Yeah, and it works.
And then, yeah, Verona kind of pops out. She's like, ah, "Ow!" And Lucy's just like, oh, "Fuck off!" Like,
yeah,
it's so good. I love the dynamic these three have so much.
it's good, isn't it? I really like. They kind of realized that, and Lucy kind of realizes that if you change someone's form and therefore change their brain, deals you make around things like you can't stop me from having a happy life are kind of nothing, because if you can change someone's brain so that they're happy with what would be a terrible life, then you're satisfying the requirements of that
Yeah.
bargain. So they've been exposed to a whole new set of loopholes that they hadn't really been considering, which is good because they're going to need to be exposed to these kinds of things so they stop making these same mistakes.
Yeah, you kind of need to be like, you can't put me in something I would currently consider to be unhappy or something. Like it's
Yeah, I would use the wording, you can't do anything that I would regard as negative in my current frame of mind.
Yeah, but then that opens up because they're 13-year-olds. Like, you know, that opens up like a whole other set of things where they're going to be different people by the time they're 40.
Yeah, I mean, they say something like this to Marisica later on in this chapter, and her response is like, I mean, I'll agree to that for today. I don't know what the fuck you're going to think later on.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you're right. It's that whole thing where, like, again, I do think that Marisica and Guillermet are actually teaching them some invaluable lessons, just not in the most peaceful way. It's like the faerie are like, okay, we'll teach you, but we're going to fuck with you to do it. Just in a hopefully not as harmful as possible way.
Well, I think the fucking with them that we see here is intentionally to teach them stuff, right? There are presumably other manipulations going on that aren't to teach them stuff, but at least in the tricks that we find out about so far, they're being pretty on the level, so that's good.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will remain that way.
Yeah. So what do we think the significance of a mink is here? I kind of, you know, when we find out that it's this weaselly thing, I was trying to think, why is this the form that Marisica puts Avery into? And really the only thing I could think of was kind of an eagerness to escape, which mirrors Verona's desire to, you know, leave behind her current life, I suppose. But I'm curious whether you have any additional thoughts than that. Feels like there should be more to it.
I did the Googling.
Nice, good on you.
And so, for those who don't know, like Northern Native American cultures, like a lot of them had this concept of totem animals, which is similar-ish to what you sort of hear when you hear like spirit animal, like in Hollywood and stuff. Like again, as an Australian, most of my knowledge of North American cultures is very indirect. But basically, this whole idea of totem and spirit animals is that like animals have these symbols and meanings associated with them, and you know you're meant to use those to guide your life and stuff in the actual cultures. But it's just kind of interesting here to look at like how what imagery surrounds the mink and like how Verona's tapping into it. So what I sort of found, like the general consensus from some websites was like minks are really playful, and basically the main thing their totem energy seems to be associated with that I found was like this whole idea of they don't thrive in impoverished environments. But it was made clear in most things. Impoverished doesn't mean like, necessarily poor of resources. Like specifically one of the things that comes up is this idea of like, environments that are like limiting you or making you bored. Which I think like speaks a lot more to
Yeah.
sort of, Verona's home life.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Um, and so like a lot of these totem things, like it comes back to how the animal actually lives. So like for minks, some of the inspiration for that meaning in the totem system is they actually live in like they're very territorial. So each mink will have its own sort of territory that it controls, and they're quite controlling about it. So kind of links to Verona's idea of like the gardens she starts to talk about here. Um, but like the little aside that really sealed sort of the deal here for me was one of the other things it mentions is that minks are solitary,
Mm.
and they do meet up and like have sex during the mating season, but then they just go back to living in their own territories.
Which is
Um,
exactly what
yeah,
Ren described her ideal situation would be, huh?
exactly. Like that was one of those moments where I was just like, Wobber's such a fucking genius. I mean the downside to this that some of them sort of talk about is like minks. They're actually very sought after for their fur. Like
Mm.
hunters and stuff. Like they were hunted a lot for their fur, so they're a bit of a target, which just has me worried in the context of the Fae. Like, is this? I'm worried. I'm as I said, I'm very worried that Verona is specifically being targeted by the Fae, perhaps to maybe eventually turn into one, or I don't know. Maybe they won't let her get that far. Whatever. Yeah, very nervous for Verona,
Mm.
but it was really
Yeah.
cool. Like, yeah, there was actually a lot to mine in terms of linking minks to Verona, which is so cool. Like, there's always so much thought put into little details like this.
Yeah, it's the exact kind of thing where Wildbow picks these things for a number of reasons that become clear as we learn more. Um,
Yeah,
God, yeah, that's good. That's a lot of good stuff. Yeah, Mink Verona does eventually regain enough of her senses to be able to talk while in mink form, and it's adorable. She's really digging it. At,
of course she is though. Like, weren't you just like when she first got the ability to speak again, and she's like, "I like this." Weren't you just sort of like, "Ah, fucking, of course you do."
yeah,
Like,
she's not even slightly upset with Marisica that she was turned into a mink. She's just like 100% on board with it as soon as she's back, which is an insane thing for her to be thinking.
yeah. It's just so her. Like, I never doubted it for a second.
Yeah, God. Also, apparently, Alpi lives in the same cave, which means that this is now a great idea for a sitcom. It's called Two and a Half Fae, and it's about these two fairies and the one a half fairy, which I guess a nightmare kind of counts as, that live in this cave and hang out together.
I mean, I'd watch it.
Yeah, I'd watch it. So get on it, Wildbo.
Actually, and speaking of like, oh, that's so Verona that she'd be okay with being turned into a mink. Avery and Alpi sure hit it off.
Yep. The crush that Avery 100% has on Alpi is great. I love it. Alpi is probably my favorite of the others in Kennet at this point. She's genuinely such a delight every time she enters a story, and it makes me worried that she's going to be the most evil in actuality, but we'll see.
Yeah, because I'm like wary of the fact that we're seeing her next to the fairy, which just would make everyone seem trustworthy.
Yeah.
But I can't help but just think she's so on the level. I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but like even the last time we saw her with Lucy, she just seemed genuine. And there's just something about the way she is here as well. I just trust her. And like I'm ignoring all the other signs, like, the way Marcy's like, oh, Alpi should help you when you go on your travels. And it's like, okay, well, if Marcy's suggesting it, I don't trust it. But like I'm just putting all that aside and I'm just gonna go all in on Alpi's great and it's fine.
Yeah. I think the bit that really clinches it for me that makes Alpi seem so trustworthy is there's this one moment where she kind of puts her foot in her mouth and offends Lucy by making reference to giving a girl dreams of her dad dying, which presumably hits a nerve for Lucy, who has an absent father that we don't fully know the story of.
Well, I mean, I think there's an implication here that Lucy's father has passed.
Yes, I think so. So that obviously hits home for Lucy, and she reacts, and Alpi immediately seems genuinely apologetic and remorseful that she's accidentally made this gaffe without like realizing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like she seems yeah, you're right. There's that moment just sort of makes you think, oh, like she didn't mean it. And she doesn't. Nothing has led us to believe that she's as good an actor as the Fae might be.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, like maybe part of that, like something that's really interesting here is like the way we learn Alpi's backstory, and she was once like a human girl who just kind of like fell through the cracks a bit and became this sort of other, as her family kind of forgot about her, and like I mean, her and Avery really connect on this point, because it's not that different to what Avery was going through, and if we're spitballing what types of other the Kenneteers were heading towards becoming.
Yeah.
Like this is maybe the realm of possibilities for Avery, because it kind of seemed like that's where she was heading.
Yeah, I mean, Alpi makes offers for the rest of them to escort her on her rounds. Maybe we will see Avery do just that and become
Yeah.
a apprentice nightmare.
Well, what's interesting is like Avery had this sense of she wasn't telling people they were actually special. Like Alpi's whole thing was that she started waking people up and apparently just sort of started to turn into an other because she got real good at it and everyone was forgetting about her apart from that, which is like fucking nightmarish to think about.
Yeah.
But you just kind of wonder, like Avery's whole thing was that she didn't think people were getting enough credit for being who they were. So I don't know what kind of other that turns you into, but like someone who sneaks around and maybe she was going to be a Cupid or something.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, God. I mean, she kind of does that.
Some kind of matchmaker.
Yeah. Maybe that's her. Maybe this is going to be what she does. She goes around, restoring self-esteem of people that she likes by pretending to be cute boys.
Yeah, I was more thinking she was just going to play like a matchmaker or something, but like,
yeah,
your idea is certainly where she heads in this chapter.
In this chapter, yeah. The other thing is Alpi doesn't try and hide her monstrous nature at all, right? Like
true.
She gives this like it's the circle of life kind of vibe.
It's cosmological, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I fucking love that line. That's my new catchphrase. But yeah, you're right. She's just kind of upfront about the bad things she does as well as the good things, which makes her just seem so much more trustworthy.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we'll see. So okay, here's the juicy lore that Alpi drops as well, which is fucking juicy as hell. We learn about these kind of alternate spaces that exist. And so there's the Abyss, there's the Fairy Court, there's the Warrens, there's the Ruins, and the Paths. And the Paths are the ones that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And they're the ones that they're the only ones we really get anything concrete on.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that when we get to the bonus bits. But goddamn, this is a just great little world building. I'm so excited to find out more about these alt spaces that we're going to see.
Yeah, this is the coolest shit. Yeah. I'll save my comments until we get to the bonus material because it goes into it a lot more. But I'm also just fascinated with Alpi with this idea that she like just has an instinct. Like she talks about how she doesn't have a boss. She just kind of follows her instincts, which I'm assuming are like the spirits. And the spirits are just kind of like, oh, there's a wrinkle over there. Can you go give someone a nightmare to sort it out? Like,
you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency.
Yes.
Where she's just one of these primal forces that goes around doing primal force things.
Yeah, that's a really good comparison. But it also begs questions like, why is the universe so wrinkled? Like,
yeah, true.
Do you like the other thing I was thinking is like, is this karma? Like, is part of this is this associated with the karma stuff Charles was talking about? Like, I wonder if Alpi pays Charles regular visits to give him
shitty nightmares.
Karma.
That would be so funny. One of her regular customers is she goes and gives shitty dreams to Charles. Oh, classic. I hope that's true.
I'm gonna headcanon it until proven otherwise, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So this kind of ends the first scene with the Fae, and we follow Avery. She goes back home, and she has an interaction with her family and with Grumble before she decides to head back to the Fae.
Yeah. I love how this is set up. Like before they leave, there's like a moment where they're all just sort of leaving, and Avery's like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to come back. Thank you very much." And then Marissa sort of fucking teleports over and whispers in her ear for a second, and from that point, she's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna come
Yeah, I'm
back."
coming back. Yeah,
And she's just like,
exactly.
"Oh fuck no! Like, are you
Yeah.
serious?"
We don't find out what it is. There's a lot of this, us not knowing exactly what's going on until the end of the chapter. And then the chapter
Yeah,
ends with another one as well. But it pays off so effectively here.
yeah.
We'll get to that in a bit. First, let's talk about Grumble, an interesting character. We finally get a bit more of a spotlight on him. And I wanted to bring out a 100% true theory that was left by Discord user Sylpharina.
Okay, yep. I think I know where this is going.
And this theory is that Grumble killed the Carmine Beast. And there's a lot of evidence for this. It really stacks up when you start to think about it. One, he's very suspicious. Two, the stroke that he had is almost certainly magical. Why not? It can't prove it's not. And three, with its dying breath, the Carmine Beast went to the hockey arena where Avery was almost certainly playing a game. Why would the Carmine Beast go there? To find the person who killed it, who was there watching their granddaughter play hockey. It all just adds up, and so I'm gonna just preemptively call this confirmed.
I honestly, the only thing that I have to say against this, and I hate that there's only one thing, is that in this chapter, Grumble mentions that, or he mentions her soccer team, but she doesn't play soccer, so I don't think he actually does go and watch her.
Well, he's old, and his brain has been, hurt by many, many years of practicing. So
I don't know. I'm torn between telling you not to encourage this behavior from Sylphrina, or trying to tell Sylphrina not to encourage this behavior from you. I think you're just both bad influences on each other.
Yep, I'll accept that. I think.
But yeah, I mean, again, like this conversation with Grumble definitely does set up like, he's trying to be sweet and he's trying to be nice, and it's going real well, and then he just makes that comment about Avery meeting a man and having children, and you can just see how that sort of is that final nudge I think she needed to go ahead with what the second half of this chapter is.
Yep, it just doesn't. I mean, yeah. There have been moments of kind of thinking, it doesn't seem like she's obviously not out to her family, but it seems like there's a bit of a wink nudge thing going on with Grumble, and this kind of confirms that isn't true to the extent that he knows that she's gay.
Yeah,
which is a bit heartbreaking. Like it means she's got nobody in her family that is fully there with her.
Yeah, well, that comment just sort of. This is the part where it's like she starts to actually connect with her family a bit, which you think might make her change her mind or something, and that just sort of becomes the final wedge that stops that from happening.
Yeah. They head back, and they're talking about the glamour gift here. It's good that they set up some more ground rules so that Marissa can't completely fuck with Avery as she did Verona. That's nice.
Yeah, I mean, as we said, maybe they're learning a bit, like through operating with the faerie. I mean, again, I think there's still loopholes here. There probably always will be.
Yeah. Definite improvements to be made.
Again, while I'm banging this drum about Verona feeling kind of fey to me, wait, am I the only one who felt like she was a really bad influence on Avery during this whole section? Like she's still treating this whole thing like a bit of a game and like it's fun. It's very Verona, but there's like as Avery's undergoing this transformation, there's all this stuff where like Verona's just like, oh, just go out there and have fun, and she's kind of laughing and joking about the whole thing when Avery comes back at the end, and like Avery's falling apart inside as this is happening. Like she's so conflicted about what she's going through. Verona's just like, haha, that was awesome.
Yeah, great work. You used magic for a very potentially ethically grey. Not even. I don't think it's that grey. Definitely ethically grey, if not just outright wrong.
I think it's pretty black.
Yes. Verona just does not give a shit, and that's great.
Yeah. Again, like I was just like, I'm like, Verona, I love you, but get your shit together. Like, this is not okay. And like, yeah, I don't know. So again, I'm just like, the more that they're hanging out with the Fae, the more I kind of feel like Verona just seems to be on their wavelength a bit, and that's just very concerning to me.
Yep. Yes, it is. So yeah, let's talk about it. So basically, what they do is Avery learns how to use glamour to make herself look like a boy before she goes off to flirt and then kiss Pamela.
Yeah. And so there's this sort of thing that Avery does where she frames it as I'm doing this just for Pam to give her
Yeah.
the confidence boost I regret not giving her months ago.
Yep.
And I mean, that's true, but also like there's definitely a part of Avery that wanted this, and there's also like I think a bigger part of her that didn't, and that's the part that wins out in the end. But yeah, like the whole thing's just such a mess. Like this is really the one where you can feel the Fae getting their claws in. Like they've sort of put her in this situation, and you know now they're going to completely fuck her up with the emotional trauma she's going to have from doing this.
Yeah. The fact that this is a thing that she does makes me very worried because like okay, she's 13, like whatever. This is the kind of use of magic that I think is to be expected from a 13-year-old, at least until they kind of, and Avery does it, and as she's doing it, kind of realizes, well, this is kind of gross, right?
Yeah.
But it's totally coupled with the fact that Marissa has set up that there's no one for Avery to have a genuine connection with and relationship with in Kennet. Like it is just basically Marissa baiting Avery into becoming dependent on her to do this with glamour, right? Like that's pretty horrifying.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's just it has me so worried because yeah, she sort of crosses some lines here, and it's like it's a sort of lines like things like Harry Potter always had love potions like this and never really dealt with the seriousness of what was happening. So
Yeah.
I'm quite glad that like Pale's sort of done a bit of it here and just made it very clear. Like Avery is like this is not okay, but she kind of got. I don't want to say she got pressured into doing it because I don't think that's fully fair, but it's sort of like she got tricked a little bit or manipulated into being a situation where she did it, and she feels terrible, and that's just. But she also thinks she kind of did a good thing for Pam, and the chapter basically ends with her being like, "Yep, sign me up for Guillemets one. Like I'm all on board." And it's like, oh no,
yeah. Who knows what that's even going to be? Something equally as troubling, possibly.
I mean, I assume so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think we just sort of need to call out like how like this scene you can never really get into it because the whole scene feels dirty because Avery's constantly questioning what she's doing. Like you can tell the whole time she's like, I shouldn't be doing this. This feels like a lie. This feels wrong.
Yeah.
And like there's even the bit where she sort of hurts Pam and then she turns it around and so she's like, oh, this was a good thing I did. And it's like, okay, I don't know if you thought out the long-term ramifications of this for Pam, that she met a guy who liked her and then that guy's going to have like completely disappeared and then she's going to go back to having like a bunch of people who apparently like bully her and stuff. Like this is just going to make her want to run away or something and get out of Kennet, you'd think. Like, yeah.
But then potentially if she does leave Kennet, then maybe she's the one for Avery. So maybe it'll all work out. That's how that works, right?
I love how just as a small detail that I actually missed, but got pointed out to me on Twitter during my live read by Asgar Zeigel. The glamour starts to break at Avery, like across Avery's heart when she gets kissed, which I just thought was like really powerful imagery.
Yeah, I agree. I really like that. Yeah, so that's the end of that's more or less where the chapter ends. It ends with them, leaving another mystery of what exactly is Guillerme's present that they apparently are going to use. Something worrying, I'm sure, but we'll find that out next chapter, I guess.
Yeah, like I feel like we're going to start heading to these paths soon with Alpi, but are the faerie going to be involved in that bullshit too? Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. But for now, let's continue on to spell notes number 2, which starts with us getting a few more notes on runes and their meanings.
Yeah. I don't think I fully understand the first page of this still. I spent a lot of time looking at it. Like we get the light and the dark runes, like we get nicer looks at them. And there's some stuff down the bottom which I think is sort of summarizing how like the way you decorate the central runes affects like the emphasis that's placed on them.
Yeah.
But there's this bit in the middle that sort of talks about it says something about degrees of emphasis, and then it's like a bunch of alchemical symbols, or they're labeled as alchemical symbols. but I don't quite understand what that bit is actually telling us about them. Like, I
Mm,
hope we get to see them in action soon in the story, so I can start to actually realize what it means.
mm, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I've like I looked at this and I was like, okay, this is cool. I've taken a look at it. I've identified each of these things, and now I'm just going to remember that if those, these specific words, right, come up, like struck, what was it, struck out or something. Then I'll come back and look at this, and then this will be relevant to me. But for now, I can't really take anything from it.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely part of that for me. I'm just trying to get like a little bit familiar with them, but there's definitely a sense of I can't wait for these to show up so we can actually like put it to use. I just somebody needs to make like a video game or something like what's that, like Scribble Noughts, but it's with
Mm,
runes
mm.
in Pale. That would be so much fun.
That would be cool. That's true.
Um, anyway, okay, so yeah, just to finish up the spell notes bit, or the runes part of it. Then there's like the second page, which yeah, again, like it also doesn't really suit the audio medium, so I'll skip over it. But there's like all these extra advanced symbols, and we've already seen a few of them. Um, I'm a little mad about them because it's making me get familiar with astrology, so I'm a little bit angry that I'm having to, learn and care about astrology now to understand these symbols. But I like this idea that there's imperative symbols, which sort of tell the rune, this is when you need to do something, like this is how to activate. And
Mm,
then there are the referential ones, I think, which are like, helping to tell the spirits how it's actually meant to work.
mm.
Like, it's so cool how like advanced the rune system is already becoming. And it's just like one part of this world.
Yeah, yeah, it's a cool system for sure. And one that yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm eager to see these runes play into it more. But for now, I don't really have anything to take away from them.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the real shit in this bonus bit for me was
Yes,
absolutely the forest
the
ribbon
forest
trail.
ribbon trail instructions, which are what Miss gave to Avery, and it's basically an extended description of how to get to this forest ribbon trail and what to do when you're there. And it's bonkers.
Yeah, it's like every other line is if you don't do this exactly right, you will be lost. And then there's
Yes.
an explanation for what lost is, and it's real bad.
Yep.
Why would you do this?
Yeah. Again, another kind of ritual where I'm like, okay, cool. There are some cool like treasures that some cool magic items that you can get from this. You can get yourself a +2 weapon. You can get yourself some super bindings, some whatever bits and pieces. But it's very much like not worth it to me. Like I would say to Avery, don't do it.
Yeah. I think the crazy part to me is the text sort of says this is a common first finder's path. Like
Yeah.
like this is the intro one, and I'm just looking at how dangerous it is, and it's like if this is the fucking like who's doing this?
Yeah.
How do you what like the prizes must be really solid, and we get some sort of descriptions on what the prizes are, and I don't know, maybe I need to sit and think on them more, but like I was kind of like, you better be able to try and get a lot out of this wolf.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll see. This is the thing. My thought was when we first found out about this, when Miss gave it to Avery, I was like, oh, it's 50-50 odds we'll actually see this in the story. Now that we have this, it means we're almost certainly going to see it soon, and I'm kind of terrified for it because there's so many things that could go wrong here, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and especially like it's something that Marisica sets up that we already talked about briefly was Alpi's going to come and help them out too. Which reading this sounds like that's going to be hugely beneficial if she can
Yeah.
make it to the path with them. But yeah, like I just don't understand why you would like why this would be the sort of thing you try to specialize in. It seems crazy to me.
I mean, yeah, I guess we don't. I feel like we don't have a full grasp of what all the benefits actually are. So there presumably are some more benefits that we just haven't fully understood or seen yet.
Yeah, well, there's one interesting thing. Like, as you sort of go through, it talks about how when you reach each of the five milestones, which kind of map to the five things from the awakening ritual, which feels like a
Yeah.
link I should be able to do more with, but I don't quite know what it means. Um, but there's this sense of like you you either have to do a challenge when you reach each of these five things, or you can take it to trade it with the wolf for like some boons or whatever.
Hmm.
And I was just kind of like, Why? Wait, why wouldn't you take all 5? Like, there's nothing in the rules that says you can only take 1. I have to assume that's the case. Just from like a game design perspective, it seems weird to like just let you take all 5.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably I mean, maybe you can, but it means your encounter with the wolf becomes increasingly difficult, or you have a greater chance of failure, or whatever it is.
Maybe you get 5 smaller rewards instead of 1 big one or something.
Yeah, I could see that too. Hard to know. Yeah, this ritual is so complicated. I remember when we found out what the Hungry Choir's Hunger Games entailed, and I was like, "There's no way anyone's going to remember all these bits and pieces." But this one is like 3 times as complicated as that, and it's like it's actually insane that this is expected to be something that people just do as like their entry level to being a finder.
Yeah, like how crazy are the other ones that this is it?
Yeah.
I mean, just as an aside, like to get a bit more meta for a minute, like I love this as just like a bit of a horror concept. Like there's something so horrifying about this path. Like it's so poorly formed in the sense that like it changes and it's a bit unpredictable. And there's like this path that you can't step off. My favorite detail is that you have to tell the wolf that you don't want to remember what it does to you before it puts you back in reality.
Yeah.
Which is just so fucking horrifying.
Yeah.
Why do people do this?
It's the kind of thing where it's like I shudder to think of how that became a part of the ritual.
Well, that's like how did like I wonder how, because it can't be that somebody figured this out, right?
No,
like this must be something that like some lost other or something told them about. Or like I don't understand how you discover this, because there's so many rules, like so many lives would have had to be lost to like literally lost to figure this out naturally. So there must have been like the wolf must have come out and told some people how to do this, surely.
Or creatures like Mist that are lost kind of spread it as some kind of recruitment tool or something.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm so interested to like, and I don't know if this is the direction Pale's going to go, but like just understanding these like out of world spaces. Like there's references to the ruins, the abyss, the warrens, the fairy courts, like all these other sorts of, I mean, dimensions doesn't feel like they're like adjacent spaces.
Yeah.
But some seem like so much more removed than others. Like it doesn't feel to me like this is a world where you'd have, okay, there are 17 parallel dimensions. It's like,
yeah,
it's going to be some weird spectrum or mess of meaning. Like I think everything at the end of the day will come down to some sort of interpretive thing. Like I don't know. I'm just so interested to learn more about that.
Yeah, I mean we'll have to wait and see. That's the end of the major of the chapters that we're discussing here. We've still got a few things to discuss before we wrap up the show, but that's the end of the chapters that we're discussing today.
Yes. So for our next bit, let's we're going to pull out some highlights from the Pale Predictor entries that we've gotten over the past week.
Yep.
So I guess, Ruben, you already touched on Sylphrena's one.
Yeah, I love that prediction, and I'm sure it will be true.
I actually found this one from Lapsed Classicist, which I just love, which is that Marisica will wear the Kel suit at some point to cause trouble.
Oh, shit. That is a good one.
Yeah, as soon as I read that, I was like, oh, I can see that happening.
Good. Oh, fuck. What a great prediction.
So yeah, I guess keep an eye out for Kel to suddenly reappear in the schoolyard or some shit and just completely set off a chain of events.
Yeah, especially because it's presumably tainted, or not tainted, but like imbued with Avery's, like some of Avery's energy and self. So that is definitely now a vector for attack.
Yeah. I just hadn't even thought of that when I read it. I was like, fucking hell, that's brilliant.
It's so good. Oh shit, what a great one. Great work, Lapsed Classicist.
Yes, and so on that note, let's head into the discussion question that we ran last week, which was, how can the Kenneteers beat the Hungry Choir?
Yeah, we got a few answers to this. I mean, the way that we heard about in story is beating it to drain it of power, right?
Yeah.
And so a few answers play off of that. Brawl 97 talks about this as the first, although they then potentially think that another way to do it would be to weaken them by just killing or destroying as many waifs as possible, so that eventually people can just break the rules with impunity without needing to worry about being bitten or eaten. They can fight off the wraiths and then just do whatever the fuck they want, basically, and that dismantles the entire ritual.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this one, just because, maybe that would have worked when the Hungry Choir wasn't as big, but I think maybe it's too late for that. I also wonder, again, I'm not sure this is the kind of world where, waifs just exist in a limited 1-to-1 ratio. I don't think it's there's just 100 waifs. I'm sure this choir has the ability to kind of replenish them at the cost of power.
Yes.
Admittedly.
So if you kill enough, maybe it would work. I don't know.
I just wonder if it's anywhere near a feasible amount at this point. It could be literally millions. You'd have to have John in some sort of mounted railgun or something.
And that's the epic finale of Bale. John in a giant mecha with two machine guns blasting waifs. Blasting children and blowing them up. Exactly what we all want to see from this story.
I did love Brawl's suggestion though of just help people win it on their 8th night. I mean, sure, you'll kill hundreds in the process, but if you make lots of winners, it'll be fine.
Well, there was one that I really liked. We didn't pull it out, so I can't remember which one it was. But what you can do is, if you get somebody to win it, so theoretically Wink, let's say, and then the next night there need to be 8 new contestants, because yes, you've sacrificed the 7 other people that were doing it with Wink, whatever. That's a given. Yeah. Help Wink win it, sacrifice those 7 people, and then you'll get a group of 8 all coming in on the same night, and then you help them win, and you just keep this cycle going of having 8 winners coming through each time, and then that would presumably fuck it up beyond repair.
Yeah, I like that. You'd kill a lot of people in the meantime, but you'd get there. We got an answer from Lunix, who it was a very thorough answer, so I've just sort of pulled out what I thought were the highlights, but you should go read it. It's got title, headings and everything. But they sort of talked about how and a bunch of answers brought up how Marisica kind of mentioned that you can challenge it in 2.2. Marisica set up this idea, and we kind of skipped over it, that you can challenge the Hungry Choir to prove that it's possible. And it will have to do so, and it'll gain power if it does, but it'll lose it a lot if it can't. And so Ludix kind of suggested, you do this, but you try to stack the odds against the Hungry Choir. They specifically thought, bringing in some sort of big spirit of moderation so that people wouldn't be as greedy in its presence, so that they just wouldn't do the ritual. Which, it maybe isn't the best example, because I feel like a giant spirit of moderation is a bit of a tautology.
True.
Paradox.
Yeah.
But I like that sort of way of thinking of setting up this scenario where it has to prove that it's possible and trying to find ways to undermine it while it's doing that. And in fact, I'll use that as a segue to bring up Landis 963's answer. Because I thought this was maybe the cleverest suggestion about using Marisica's point. Which was, so the 8th night that was up and coming, it was that girl who had no feet. And Marisica actually mentioned that they sort of would have to prove that it was winnable with the waifs copying their injuries.
Yeah.
So it's just that girl with no feet. There's no way.
There's no way. Exactly. Exactly. Right.
So maybe maybe they could go in and be prove that it's possible for this girl with no feet to win tonight. I don't know if they're allowed to do that, but that would definitely be a good avenue. I mean, I think they've actually missed their chance, because I'm pretty sure while 2.3 was happening, while Avery was sort of doing the whole thing with Pam, I think that's when
it's already
Wink was doing her 7th night. So we might have missed the boat on that one, but it's a great idea.
I think there's no way Wink is dead without us getting to see Wink doing her 8th night.
I kind of hope we get to see Wink do her 8th night. It's going to be fascinating whatever happens next.
Yeah, definitely. We will see, I suppose. A lot of great answers to the discussion question. So thanks everyone who left answers to that. I think we are going to not do a discussion question this week, but we'll have another one next week for everyone to leave comments on. If you want something to discuss in the meantime, leave your thoughts on some interesting predictions in our Pale Predictor app, which you can find linked in the show notes down below.
Yes. And before everyone runs off, we're
Hmm.
going to do our outro now, but we will be doing Pact to Pact in a minute.
Yeah, so
Again,
we'll
we're
be
going to,
talking about some packed spoilers for some of the things that we've
yes.
seen in the past few chapters. But you have to stick around through the outro if you want that.
But for those of you who are going to run off in a minute, thank you for listening. If you want to, see what else is on the Doof Network, head to doofmedia.com. There's tons of stuff, even some of it from us.
Yep.
We just featured in the Ward world, actually.
We, as one of our donation goals for our charity live stream a few months ago, we pledged to do a episode diving deep in Ward, and we did that. It's over on the We've Got Ward feed if you want to go check it out.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun making it in the end. So I think go check it out and listen to all the other stuff. Like there's still stuff popping up on that feed every now and then. If you somehow missed the Wildbow interview, that's there too.
In case you missed it as well, we did a bit of a bonus piece of Pale content where we discussed with Scott and Matt their reflections on how the story is going so far and what they think of Arc 1 and the interlude prologue to this very story. So if you somehow missed that, scroll up in your feed and grab that and take a look at that too.
Yep. And if you're liking all this doof stuff, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/doofmedia. The network only exists because of our patrons. You get tons of cool perks as well. Like at the $5 and above tier, the Doof Dancer tier, you get access to the Doof and Chills, which when this episode comes out is it's only a couple of days until we have the Q&A with Matthias and Clarence. So of course, the two guys running the new Decomposing Worm podcast.
Yep. Great show, great people. So I'm sure that chat will be great. So if you want access to it, head on to Patreon and make sure that you're pledging at the correct level. And while you're on Patreon, why don't you check out Wildbow's Patreon, because he is the one who actually created all this cool shit that we talk about every week for 2 hours. So head on over to Wildbow's Patreon and back him as well. Exchange the coin with him, I guess we call it.
Is Wildbow the wolf?
Yeah, why not?
He holds the stories behind the negotiations.
Yeah. Yes. So thanks everyone for joining us. Now let's go back to Pact.
Yes, so Pact spoilers starting now.
What about when Blake blew up the cathedral? That didn't happen.
What?
Yeah, sorry, I was just...
I mean, it kind of... Well, no, that was Andy.
Yeah. Just to make sure we had some Pact spoilers to scare out all the non-Pact readers.
Yeah, so where should we start here? We've got a bunch of points we wanted to bring up as we're sort of tying what we're learning in Pale back to Pact.
Let's start with a very simple one, which is we find out about a fairy that Marisica refers to as Grey Isbold, who gives birth to millions of rats. And Wildbow has confirmed this is the fairy that Johannes had kind of, manipulated rat populations to draw out and then bound and then used in an attempt against Faisal when during that kind of long competition that they had when Faisal agreed to become Johannes's familiar. So that's just a fun little piece of the world. That
I'd forgotten about that. Insane.
I think that character is listed under Arthild in the Pact Wiki, so you can check them out. That's what I did, because I had completely forgotten about them too.
Yes. In fact, speaking of faerie that were in Pact, I mean, obviously we've just learned about this whole court system, so immediately I'm trying to put all the faerie we've met into the various courts that we've just found out about.
Yeah. Which do you think Podrick and co are in?
So, I mean, I think all the fae that we met in Pact are from, High Spring and High Fall. But I don't know if we've quite got enough for me to be confident on exactly which one of those two.
Yeah, I don't think they were from High or Summer Above, and they didn't seem like they were from any of the Dark Choirs.
Latita, actually, could maybe be Summer Above.
Oh, yeah, true. She was, a swordswoman going around kind of stabbing things. I could see that.
But Podrick, Esselt, and Keller.
Yeah.
I can't. Yeah, I feel like they may be all from the same one. I want to say High Spring, just because there's that focus on aristocracy and being all sort of posh, I guess.
Yeah.
But like I'm like it could be Highfall. I'm not super confident.
Yeah, I agree. I'm there with you. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Like, were there any other fairy? There were the ones we met in the hyenas domain, but like,
Yeah. And
God knows, like,
there was when Sandra went to the fairy
oh
court,
yeah.
but I don't remember which court that was. If we ever found that out,
I don't think we found it out, but again, that's like I just knowing what we know
feels
about High Spring
aristocratic. Yeah, doesn't it?
and High Fall, like but it could be because like the thing about the High Fall as well is they were more tangled in human ways, which
Yeah.
maybe to me says they were the kind of court that would make those familiar deals with families like the Duchamps.
Mm.
So yeah, I think they were just described as melodramatic and brooding, which like yeah, I don't know, like High Spring and High Fall I think applies to most of the fairies that we met. So I can't quite confidently pin them to one or the other yet. I don't think.
Yeah.
Latita's maybe the only one who I'm a bit more like. I think she's summer above.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'd be interested to hear from the audience. In spoiler, context. Like obviously, don't go throwing this unspoiled in the Reddit channel. But if you have any strong feelings and reasons why, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah. Cool. What else?
Actually, another just before we leave the fairy behind. I'm pretty sure in Deep Impact 8.1, I pretty much sort of called this whole fairy origin story thing. Like I sort of said that I saw the fairy being an embodiment of like lies and deception. And that's sort of what we learn here. So I don't know if I was 100%, but I'm just going to sit here and be smug about it anyway. I don't even know if that was a common fan theory before I said it, but I'm going to sit here and be proud of myself for finally getting like a long-term theory, maybe mostly correct.
Good stuff. Great work, Elliot. It feels good when you get a big theory right, as I'm sure to find out soon.
Yeah, one day you'll.
Good stuff.
Yeah. What else? This isn't so, but this is more of a follow up. I think like we had Matt and Scott on, and we talked about Pact stuff with them, and we sort of kept that discussion going a little bit between the four of us, like after recording. And I just wanted to pull out like something, like a thought that was had after that discussion is we're talking a bit more about Mags coming into the story, which was something Matt talked about on air. And like something that I'm so mad I didn't think about while we were having that conversation is this whole idea of I would actually love to see Mags in this story now, because Impact Impact, she was this sort of like, plucky up and coming practitioner who, had bad stuff happen to her and she got trapped. But like, she was always sort of the young upstart. And this story's set like 6 years later. And so I think what's fun now is we've got the three Kenneteers who are now kind of our like, intrepid young upstarts. And Mags would, by comparison, be this like old, grizzled mid-20s practitioner who's maybe even perhaps a role model or a warning of the future, depending on how she's going. Like, so I could actually see Mags working in this story just because it would be such a different view on her to what we got in Pact. Like, she's not the young upstart anymore. Now she is the person they're looking to as the future vision, who's grizzled and been worn down by the world.
Yeah, I could see that, especially if there's potentially going to be more encounters with Faerie. She could be a good warning sign of what not to do, I suppose.
Yeah, speaking as like a warning of what you could become.
Yeah,
like playing around with Faerie.
Yeah. One of the things I want to talk about is the idea of the wolf, which, as I was reading through this bonus bit that we covered, it really gave me very strong like Blackfish vibes, like the abyss Blackfish that Blake and Green Eyes had encountered separately. I don't know what it was. It just like the wolf had this concept of. I think specifically the part that really jumped out to me was it seemed to have different forms depending on who you were, right? And you could even kind of request that it didn't take, or that it took a more specific form from your life. Or that it didn't take a form. And so I was kind of like, is it the same thing? Is this just a common thread across these pocket dimensions or whatever you want to call them? Or is it like, I don't know.
Well, I think like that's why I'm so excited to get into these adjacent spaces, because I think like my understanding at the moment of the forest ribbon trail is that it's perhaps like further removed from reality
Even than the
than
abyss
say
was.
like the
Yeah.
abyss. And my assumption is that like things get even more interpretive and symbolic the further you go.
Mm.
So there's maybe overlap, but like the wolf might be the sort of blackfish thing, but on another level.
Like one level deeper. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Like I'm hesitant to even call things like levels in this because
Sure.
like that feels too numerical. Like it's all in my mind. This is all just going to be spectrums, like overlapping spectrums of reality. Like you could see the spirit world just being you moving to a place where the spiritual interpretation of objects is more literal. Well, yeah, I don't know. I haven't clicked together how Wildbow is forming the lists of what places there are, and I can't wait to try and put that puzzle together.
Yeah.
But like, like are the paths or like so the Reuben Trail, like that to me feels like it takes so much of its form based on the person who goes there. It's almost like saying to me, it's so far removed from reality that it actually relies on the person visiting it to get form. Like, we sort of talked about impact, how humans were having so much of an impact on the world. And what that's almost saying to me is like these planes are barely holding together, and it kind of relies on the person viewing it to take form.
Yeah. I guess the more abstract it gets, the more I think that makes sense.
Yeah, which is just like that's such a cool concept. And like, what the fuck else is out there then? Like this ribbon trail is so fucking weird. It's probably like it probably is the beginner finder's path.
Yeah.
It just again calls into question why would anyone choose this as a specialist?
Yeah. Yeah. God, I don't know. That's pretty wild.
So yeah, I don't know. I really hope we get to dive into a lot more about these adjacent spaces because I really want to try and figure out the system Wildbow's using to decide what ones exist. Like the Forest Ribbon Trail, I'm just trying to think of like, is there anything that maps to like the ideas of like spirit worlds and fairy courts, and even the abyss. You could sort of draw connections between them and like existing mythology. Like the abyss could sort of be various versions of hell or something. But the Forest Ribbon Trail is that anything? Like if anyone has any connections, because I've got to is like some sort of like. Here in Australia, like the Indigenous Australians have like the concepts of like walkabouts and spirit journeys and stuff. Like, is it like a North American something to do with that? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it feels like it's yeah, I don't know. There's all these kind of floating around ideas. Obviously, there's a lot of North American imagery that we've seen. I don't think it's explicitly the same, but there's like the idea of taking your kind of spirit guide along with you felt very evocative of that to me as well, right? But it doesn't feel explicit enough to put my finger on it yet.
Yeah. It's almost kind of like maybe are these places formed out of ideas, and then it's like, so what's the process for an idea forming one of these other dimensions? Like maybe that's just all it is. I don't know. Anyway, we'll see. I'm going to stop wasting everyone's time just spouting nonsense.
I mean, you never know. It's good to get these things down as predictions so that if they pay off, we can claim the credits for them.
Sure. But yeah, anyway, I think that's all we had on this week's Backed to Packed.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining. As usual, when we do Back to Packed, we've already finished the outro, so we're going to just awkwardly end the show here.